welcome to Found with Trish and Sherry. It is our podcast about adoption, building families, DNA searches, and anything related to that. Hi, Sherry. How are you?
I'm good, Trish. How are you?
Wonderful. Well, today we have somebody that I have known for a little bit, and he is a really great author. His name is Tom LaMarr. He's written all different kinds of books, but the one we're particularly interested today is called Geezer Dad. And let me welcome him. Hi, Tom. How are you?
Hi.
Good.
Good to be here. Glad to be here.
Well, tell us a little
Good.
bit
How are you
about
doing?
yourself.
Being a dad is a big deal to me. Being a parent is great. And my setting is we're in a room full of boxes because this is just parenting in general, but having kids brings surprises. And my daughter is now out of school. She went to a special effects makeup school and has work opportunities in Chicago, and we have family in Chicago. So suddenly I have one more move in me, which I had no idea. So,
Well, I love the title of your book, Geezer Dad, and I'm assuming and know already that that's because you think of yourself as an older parent. How old were you when you adopted?
I was nearing 50. I was 48, I believe, when our adoption came through.
And what led you to adopt, Tom?
And that makes me older now.
We're all older now.
Well, my wife and I had tried, we didn't get deep into fertility treatments, but we had issues with infertility. And we looked at all the options. I was a fan of adoption early on because partly I had friends who were adopted and they're just great friends, you know. But it just seemed natural. And yes, it takes a bit of work, but so does everything worthwhile in life.
Very true.
We met other people in the process. It's amazing too when you start talking about adoption, how many people have a connection to adoption, as in their adoptive parents or they're adopted, and it's not something that just comes up in conversation everywhere you go. And all of that was great reassurance to my wife, and she ended up very much jumping into the process and embracing it. And we had no regrets whatsoever.
So what was your experience like? Did you have a closed adoption, an open adoption? How did you find your daughter?
It was I would say it was mostly closed. That we met the mother, the biological mother. The biological father was involved to some extent, but the biological mother did not want a long-term relationship. She was very happy to meet us and see what she was, giving up and agreeing to. But I think she wanted us to be the parents and just go forward from there. And she was great. Big decision, tough decision, but I thought she chose wisely for her child too. I think, given all the circumstances that were part of this, but we adopted our daughter. She was fairly young, not quite birth, but she had foster parents for a few weeks while things were resolved, and she's just our kid. My kid.
So you had a few weeks to get ready at home, and then you get the news that the baby's coming, and what happens then? What's going through your brain at that point?
Actually, and that's in Geezer Dad, we had a few hours to get used to the idea, because it happened quickly when it did happen. And we had a state trooper come to our house and show us how to install a car seat. And of course, we hadn't slept for days. And they're more complicated than most people would realize who don't have experience with them. And I watched this guy kill himself getting this car seat in. I thought, oh, this is great. And then he unhooked everything and said, okay, your turn. It was difficult.
I had to go to the fire station. I couldn't figure it out. I mean, I had diagrams. I had YouTube videos, and I'm like, it's just a car seat. How hard could it possibly be? Oh, yeah.
But then the next day we met the biological mother, and a few days later we met our daughter. So.
You hadn't met her before?
No, and I've actually learned some new things that I did not know when I wrote Geezer Dad. But she entered the process relatively late. I did not. I don't think I knew that, but Geezer Dad, I can also forget things. But so I didn't realize how quickly things had happened on that end too.
Yeah, my adoption happened pretty quickly too. They had told my parents it would probably be a few years, and they called pretty quickly. And my mom and dad got in the car and drove over to Daytona. And while she was parking the car, he went in and said, "We'll take her." And my mom said, "It's a good thing I agreed." So I guess you know.
We had the long, slow auditioning process, basically, where we prepared videos and wrote letters and were vetted pretty well, which really all parents should be. But then when it starts happening, it happens quickly. Mm-hmm. And you're putting together all kinds of furniture in your house, again, on no sleep.
Do you find that you had any friends or work people or anybody that was negative about it, or was it a pretty positive experience all around?
It was a very positive experience all around, though. Ironically, because of Geezer Dad, I had one negative experience. And this
really?
Post book, but one woman who looked at it, a publisher, said, "Oh, I love it, but I'm on the other side of the argument." And
which is?
I feel naive, but I thought, what argument is this? And it was older people shouldn't adopt. And the argument was we'd become caretaker, or the child would become a caretaker, when she was 20 rather than 40, like you're supposed to. And I read up on it. And sure enough, there was a controversy, but I don't recall it having been exposed to it before. And that just made, me determined to prove her wrong. I'm going to stick around and be a good dad. So.
Yeah, I ran into a controversy, and I've talked about this before, but when I was searching online and looking for like adoption support groups right after my daughter came home, because I got to thinking a lot more about my own adoption after I became an adoptive mother, more so than I did when I was just an adopted person, and ran into some groups that frankly scared me to death. They called me a child trafficker and threatened to call my work and out me as all kinds of stuff. And it was very scary. So there's a few.
Yeah.
I don't think it's the bulk of people, but there was enough there that it was scary. And I had never knew anybody that was that opposed to adoption. But I guess now with the internet, you can find anybody who pretty much believes anything.
That's true.
All in all, mine's been a very, I can't even say positive. It's just the way it is. And it's been fine. And my parents are parents, and it's just the way it is.
Yeah. And even in conversations like this, in my mind, she's just my kid all the time. And then when we're having conversations like this, I have to fill in some of the other details because I'm just her dad. And she's just my kid.
Now,
and those people on the internet who probably never go outside of their houses, the critical one, if they actually met our kids, the real human beings, their opinions would probably change.
Right.
Has she had any questions or anything along the lines of wondering who her birth parents were? Were you given any information?
Yes. And I found a letter that was to give to her later that she now has, but we had a fair amount of information, and we have tried to find her biological mother and have not had luck. I'm not sure what that means. It frightens me a little bit. I mean, she was really a nice, decent person, and I hope she's doing well. And I think it would be good for Allie, for my daughter to meet her,
Well, if you ever want help with the DNA side of that, we're at your service. That's how we found both of ours, was through DNA searches and search angels online that were volunteers and free, like DNA detectives, DNA search angels.
Oh.
And it was an interesting experience. Mostly good, I think, for both of our parts. It was a really interesting experience. My daughter has shown interest, and I've pretty much told her when she becomes an adult, because not everything we found was good. Some of it was hard to swallow. And I think it would have changed who I was if I'd have learned as a young teenager. It would have affected me a lot more. So we've told her, as when she becomes an adult, if she's interested. And she's never really been all that interested. But now I find that as a teenager in high school, she's finally like, yeah, I think I want to go to my hometown and all that. And I'm like, okay, well, when do you want to go? And she's like, probably after college. No problem. We'll do it then. But I'm glad that she does have some interest in it. And I think some of that is because, Aunt Sherry, and that we had done this searching ourselves. Do you think it would be, was the letter a positive thing for her to receive? How did she take it?
Yes, it was. It had more information about the biological father than I think I'd been privy to before too, which was useful. I mean, obviously.
Okay, Tom, did you read it first or did you just give it to her?
I read it first.
Yeah. And how old was she at that point?
No, this is very recent. I didn't realize it was to give her later, and probably because when we moved to Florida, things got packed away. It didn't happen when it should have. And I was digging through important papers with a purpose, thinking there might be things like this in there.
Well, as an older parent, where do you think the positives are to being?
I think there are lots of positives, and I can think of them going back right to the start, which is one, I don't take anything for granted, so I try to be prepared. And when we were in classes being prepped for being adoptive parents, I asked a question they said no one had ever asked before, which is, what if something happened to us during the period before it's made, final and legal? And again, I was shocked no one had ever asked that, but I thought, at that point, she is part of our family. Would aunts, sisters, would they have, a better position in this, or would it just go back to square one? And it turned out that the answers were all good, but again, I was shocked no one had ever asked that before, because things happen to young people too, and that seems like a pretty big question. But yeah, older parents, I think, are more appreciative of everything. I'd like to say we're more patient. I think I have been. Try to keep a little bit more organized in case something bad did happen. But my focus is not something bad happening. But obviously, the older I get, I realize bad things.
I think one of the things that has been probably better for me versus a lot of young parents is there's a lot of stuff that I just realize as you're older, it's okay. You're going to laugh about this in a year. Just let it go. Don't worry about it. And the stuff you really do have to worry about, you know a lot more what it is than you did when you were 20. And that I found very helpful.
Yeah, I think that's very true.
Yeah, that having a lot more patience, because I'd done a lot of the things that I wanted to do and I was ready. And every dollar wasn't freaking out because I'd already had moved up in my career and, had a house and had establishments. Now, I'm not saying it's bad to be a young parent at all. There's a lot of pluses to it. I don't have the same stamina as a lot of the younger parents I went to school with. And there were plenty of times that her friends would come and go, "Oh, you must be Mara's grandma." No, but thanks.
You just made a lot of great points. You just made a lot of great points that I should have made. But yeah, you're right about just the perspective of being older really does help as far as where what's really important in life and what's not. But having gotten a lot of things out of the way, accomplished things you wanted to accomplish, made the mistakes you were going to make. Yeah, it takes a lot of baggage out of everything, out of a family relationship.
Well, and I think some of the work that it takes also to adopt, you can't take it lightly. It's not, whoops, we had an accident over a weekend. You really have to, it's an investment of time and money and emotion and all that type of thing that I don't think a lot of people understand what a difficult process it can be. When you're having a biological baby, nobody quizzes you to see if you're a good enough parent. Nobody comes and inspects your house and makes sure that, and it, to me, that was kind of weird. It's like all my friends had kids and nobody was looking through their drawers or asking all these kind of invasive questions. And it was, I mean, I understand why they do it and I don't think it's a bad thing, but boy, being older, there were a few things that's like, yeah, well, you don't need to answer that. And y'all can fill in what kind of questions were. It's like, no, you don't need to know that. And, but it was just such an interesting process to see the amount of work and the amount of paperwork and all that kind of stuff that went into it. But I think it makes a lot of adoptive parents really appreciate it because they've had to work so hard for it.
Well, yeah, the opposite end, as I mentioned before, we all meet parents every now and then where you think, boy, they could have used some invasive questions.
Yeah.
And a little training.
So I had a first marriage and a second marriage. And so I had my first two children and when I was 22 and then my second one at 24 and then divorced and then remarried and had a child at 35 and 37. So I had two really young and then two really old. So I'm hearing your perspective.
That's not really old.
Well, no, not really old, but
older.
I was so as a younger mother, like I was still crawling through the ball pit, at the restaurants with the kids. But I, like you said, I did not have the patience that I had later on. I also did not have the stable marriage, which means they ended up being kids going through divorce, which took a toll on all of us, which still reflects in our lives today, all these years later. And then with the second marriage and the third baby and the fourth baby, there was a stable marriage. There was more to offer them. And like you guys have already said, I was not as reactionary. I didn't sweat the small stuff. I had already been through some things in life where I was like, okay, things generally work out. So let's, figure this out. But I was exhausted and, physically the pregnancies were harder. But definitely I didn't really realize much about adoption as a parent until I saw Trish go through it. And I think her adoption took, I want to say 5 years. And there was all of that stuff. Like her mother was living in the home at the time and had been a librarian. And so I think they said all of her fingerprints had worn off from the books and had to re-fingerprint her.
Every time we went to
crazy
paperwork, every year and a half, they would make us go through a huge process because my mom lived with us and her fingerprints wouldn't show up good enough. Then we have to go get all these police reports and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, really, she's 70 years old. If she was going to rob a bank, she'd have done it by now. I mean, she's fine, but we had to do that every single time. And it was a lot more work, and it was a long wait. I mean, it was a really long wait. Could have had 2 or 3 kids in that time. She was worth it. Absolutely worth it. But yeah, it was a long wait.
Tom, was your adoption domestic or international?
It was domestic. We had started out looking at international and there was actually, this is in the book and I don't remember it very well, but there was actually an international incident between China and the United States right when we were looking into it, and the adoption situation was getting a bit of a freeze, a bit of a Cold War type freeze, and that made us look at both and the domestic. I think part of it was the agency we found was just so good and easy to work with.
So what were your expectations as a 40-something-year-old who's had, you had your life to just travel and go see a movie at midnight and sleep in, and you've had these life experiences. What did you expect when you got a baby? And then what was the reality?
Well, in my case, it was most of the surprises were very pleasant, where the depth of the love you feel is one of those things you have to experience to understand. And jumping back to something Trish said earlier too on the stamina, that was a huge shock for me, is questioning whether I'd really survived those first 2 or 3 months. And it's amazing what's wired into our brains to keep us going.
I have never been so tired in my life.
Yeah. And yet you do it.
Mm-hmm.
That went back to my question about what if something happened before it was all finalized. And a lot of that was, I was thinking, we're going to be driving around with no sleep. That's really not a great combination for all new parents.
Right.
But
a reality for so many parents.
And in fact, having dealt with child seats, I know which person in the car would survive something, because she's got a little space capsule back there. She's pretty well protected.
Good way to put it, because it was about as complicated as putting together a space capsule.
Yes.
Well, and I'm not sure many young parents or parents in their 20s are thinking about what's written in my will and what happens if. My husband and I recently went overseas for a week. We have a 20-year-old with Down syndrome who stayed home with her brother. And I literally had written out all of my legal wants, just in case, and I was like, okay, now I need to go revisit the attorney, because the things that change from year to year and what I would want her to have change also. So I was definitely not thinking about that in my 20s.
Yes. Yeah, I've known parents in their 20s who are great parents, but they don't wear seatbelts. And you think those two things don't go together.
No.
Right.
Well, I'll tell you, the first time I read your book, I literally read it all in one swoop. I laughed, I cried, I nodded in recognition. I mean, I hit the gamut as I went through it. What do you think are some of the more unusual things that happened along your journey to adopt?
Well, I'm trying to think, but none of it seems unusual to me, so I'm having trouble coming up with an example now. But
maybe memorable. What were some of the most memorable things that happened on your journey to figuring it out?
Yeah, the pursuit of fertility treatments. Again, we didn't get too deep into that, but we got enough into that strange world for that to be unusual. And the being vetted, the meeting other people in that situation, and was not unusual, but it was fascinating. And some of the problems that we could possibly face were interesting and challenging, and life can be complicated. Where
I'll tell you one of the things that happened to me, that
parents have some terrible thing in their history.
OBGYN that I had for years, and he knew we were adopting. He's like, do you want to do and I'm like, no, I have no problem with adopting at all. I feel very confident about it. I felt very led to do it. I was just very comfortable. And I guess he really wasn't aware. I mean, he knew it'd been like 2 years, and that's about what they told us. I'm thinking he probably made a note in the paperwork, and he comes in and he goes, show me those beautiful baby pictures. And I'm like,
oh no,
not here yet. Just turned white. And I'm like, you are not the guy I want turning white on me about right now. I mean, just all the blood drained out of me. Apologizing. I'm like, no, really, It's okay. I understand. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Well, me too. But, and I had a few bad experiences where people were rude about it, or were not as accepting as I would have liked them to have been. But I guess that's kind of runs the gamut for anybody, whether you have any kind of family situation, that there's always going to be somebody that's got something to say about it. Have you had any issues with people not being accepting? Or has she?
Actually, I would say no. And actually being an older parent too, like my mom was just thrilled to have a new baby in the family. And I saw that with a number of aunts and uncles. It was a bigger deal than if it had happened 30 years earlier, 20 years earlier, I guess would be in my case. But it was just a big deal to everybody, and people were pretty excited about it. I was thinking about one interesting thing about domestic adoption was, and I thought our agency was great, but they really pushed honesty. They wanted you to deal with things you had to deal with, and not act out of desperation. I do remember other couples not being as honest as they should have been because they were so desperate to get through the process, and that did lead to complications.
So are you talking about honesty in what you said to the agency?
Yes. And but I mean, it's basically what you can handle in an adoption. And you were asking about interesting experiences. I had gone to a county foster care program once too early in the process, and looked at adopting much older child, typically with some history of social issues. And I admire everybody who goes through with that, but I realized I didn't think I would handle that very well, or would be the right dad to be doing that. And I did
definitely something to be honest about.
Yeah. And I absolutely have known adoptive parents who are having a hard time with issues after doing that. And
yeah, it's a very unique situation. Really, it's not the same as adopting an infant, that's for sure.
Right.
And
again, it's not the same as blindly having a kid, and you have a lot of information in front of you and a lot of choices to make.
So what were the conversations like when your daughter is a baby and you're debating what to say to her when she gets older, or how you're going to bridge the adoption issue with her, that she was adopted?
We were pretty open fairly early on, and early on too, told her a lot about her biological mother, and that her biological father had been involved. And we did all that, making it clear that we really loved her and this was our family.
And so did she have questions? What were the kind of things that she responded with? Did she respond with uncertainty, or what was it?
Sherry and I were very different. I didn't care that much, and I hardly ever asked any questions, and and she was constantly like, that was the main goal in life, was to find out who her parents were. So we're definitely looking at it from different angles from when we were younger.
It's funny. I laughed at what seemed an inappropriate place, but a memory came back to me where she asked intelligent questions and seemed satisfied with the answers. But I also remember that when I read to her at night, she would sometimes save a question for 9:30.
Right.
hoping to have a conversation for 2 hours.
Yep.
That would keep
Stay
from
up a
going to
little bit
sleep.
later. Yep.
But yeah, she would definitely do that for that purpose. But mostly, I think she asked pretty good questions. We had a pretty good discussion, a very good discussion.
Was there anything in her medical history that you knew about that you were concerned about? Or did you see, like my dad, he was always like, oh, Sherry drinks a ton of water. I really think she's diabetic. And it turns out I am, but they didn't know that going into it. Were there any things you were looking for medically?
No, and I don't know if she'd want me to talk about this or not, but she actually was born with a club foot, a genetic. I think that was inherited, and so we adopted her knowing there were going to be some very difficult times with medical issues. A lot of the difficulty for her, but that was one of the good things about being older too, is we had insurance. We knew we could do what was necessary.
What gave you the inspiration to write a book about it? I mean, there's a lot of people who adopt, but there's not a lot of people who write a book about the process, and there's not a lot of men who write about the process from their perspective. A lot of times it's usually the woman wants to do it, and most of the books seem to be written by women, etc. It's very unusual to have a dad that involved. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I actually think I have a good, sincere answer to that I tend to forget these days. But I really was waiting for somebody to give me this book as a gift written by someone else, and it really did not seem to be there. And I would have appreciated it during the actual process, the adoption process, just to compare notes and see what to expect. But and also just not to feel, even though we were with, in situations in classes with other couples, still you feel alone a lot of the time. And that was one of the reasons I wrote the book, is just, hey, here I am. I got through this, and it was well worth it. And that was part of it too, is there's so many, excuses you could come up with to give up at any given point in a process like this. And it's good to be reminded that, you want to stick this out. The rewards are enormous.
Right. Did you have any men that read the book that had anything to say, to add in?
I know a lot of men who have read it, and probably the biggest reaction from men is it's fun. But I think they found it interesting. I don't know that anybody had much to contribute. Again, I have some male relatives and male friends who were adopted. And I think basically the reaction was, hey, this is great. This is good. So, but I don't really remember suggestions either way. Like you could have done more of this or less of this.
One of the things that we struggled with, and then that we hear other adopted people struggle with, is feeling guilty about searching for our biological families, especially when your parents, our parents were still alive. How would you feel, honestly, if your daughter was to search?
Well, I mean, obviously there are a lot of emotions involved there, but I have helped her. We really did try to start the process with the state of Colorado, and basically on a list of, yes, we'll get in touch with you, which really surprised me that they did not seem to have any information, because I figured with the agency we worked with, there'd be something, but it'll be interesting. But I'll be there with her too. She and I have a very strong bond, and you asked about conversations. We've always been able to talk about things, and that'll be one of those times.
Right.
That's great.
Yeah.
I think a lot of adopted people want to hear that. We want reassurances that our parents, are with us on that journey, or that we're not going to hurt them by searching, or that we're dishonoring any kind of relationship with them. Yeah. Yeah, I really wanted to know my story, and
I've
then
got to admit
ended up
too. Sorry, I've got to admit too.
no.
I feel very lucky in that I really really liked the biological mother and thought she was to be admired. So I have that
Mhm.
comfort level. I don't think there'd be unpleasant surprises for my daughter if and when that
Right.
happens. And I think it's a good part.
Yeah, I always looked at it like, well, I can love more than one parent. I can love more than one child. I can love more than one friend. Why couldn't I love her biological parents? I know they exist, and without them, she wouldn't be here. So I'm pretty, um, positive towards if she wants to find them. And I'll do anything I can to help her because I know, hopefully it'll be a really good outcome and things will go fine. And I think most adoptive parents want that for their kids to have a good experience. But even if they don't and they have to deal with rejection or finding things they may not have wanted to, I think having supportive parents is a thing that'll really help in a lot of ways get you through it because you don't feel like you've lost something or that you're entitled to something that you can't get.
And because I've written this book, I have been privy to conversations from friends who sought their biological parents and had a disappointing outcome. So I
Mhm.
know it does happen,
We
obviously.
have definitely had our share of that. But I can also imagine, I can only imagine, but I can imagine that if I were an adopted mother, that I would maybe be a little jealous, or maybe I would want to feel like I was enough that they didn't want to find somebody
Yeah.
else. And that's just maybe who I am as a person, in other relationships.
And
But
I
I
think
would,
for me, that's been one of the best things is because I feel like because I'm adopted, I understand, I mean, to my core that I'm the one that did the boo-boos and the raising and the going to school and buying the tap shoes and sitting through a
Mhm.
thousand recitals of Frosty the Snowman and all that kind
Yeah,
of stuff. And that's irreplaceable. And
right.
Right.
as is the bond of having the DNA connection.
Mhm.
And I didn't think the DNA connection was all that important until we found people that I was DNA connected to. And then it changed a little bit of who I am and how I thought. And now I'm almost kind of excited and I would be very excited to be able to tell them she's had a good life. She's been happy. She has an education. We've made sure
Mhm.
she's healthy because as a mother, I keep thinking, what would I want to know? What would I be
Mhm.
worried about? Well, I would be worried that she'd been loved and taken care of. And I would love the opportunity as her mom to just be able to tell her, thank you.
Mhm.
It's been my privilege. And, whatever, wonderfulness has come from you, I appreciate it. And I'm sorry that you couldn't be the one to raise her, but I've done the best I can. I hope she's happy with the job we did.
Mhm. I know that when I did find my biological mother, I was 48 years old, and I started sharing with her my baby pictures because I thought, of course, she wants to see that. And it hurt so bad for her that she didn't want to see them, which surprised me. Tom, like you said, I was actually born with one club foot and one pigeon toe, and she was never told that. And almost, wasn't sure she wanted to believe that, which was kind of strange. But
Yeah.
she honestly didn't want to give me up for adoption. She was kind of forced into adoption. And so, those 1960 adoptions, we were told your mother wanted everything for you. They had to do, they wanted you to have the best of everything. When in reality, there just weren't any resources for them to raise us,
Mhm.
as young single women. Um, there's definitely a lot of emotions that go along with adoption that people who have biological children just don't maybe consider, you know.
And
What
to
do
your
you
point, too, one
go
thing I
ahead?
encountered, and it actually there's an example of this in the book, but again, people tell you things they never tell anybody else about adoption when you get involved with it on a personal level like this. And I did know some older friends who had, it turned out, given up a child for adoption in the dark old days where they never knew anything after that. And I know for a fact they got some closure from seeing us adopt a child, because they thought, yeah, it's witnessing it actually has a good outcome most of the time, I think. And
right. And has what maybe they wished for their child they could see happening in your
gives them a
family.
little comfort that that's probably what they did happen to their child too. I mean,
right.
Obviously that would be of great comfort.
Right.
What do you wish?
A little aside on. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Sorry, we got a little bit of a delay here, so I don't mean to keep talking over you.
Well, same here. Yeah. A little aside too on the clubfoot, the boxes packing. We found all the instruments of torture from when she was tiny. You don't really want to keep this, do you? But those shoes and the cast
and the casts.
Being a parent can be tough at times. Be the big mean person.
Well, it's tough when you start off. You've got this new baby, and you've already got something you've got to deal with. Like I had my daughter with Down syndrome. We were in therapy 10 times a week off the bat. Arrange your schedule and who's staying home and how are we going to get to all these appointments, and not necessarily what you bet on, but here's something to deal with. Yeah.
Tom, what do you wish that somebody had told you before you adopted?
I don't know that I do.
Oh, okay. Good.
One of those cases of, I'm glad everything happened the way it did in the end. I would have appreciated, I don't know, a little encouragement, a little bit of, reassurance along the way when it looked bad, because we actually did wait a long time. I was about going fast. It was 2 years into the process, everything happened fast, and those 2 years are very slow at times. But
yeah, that wait is slow and slow and slow. But boy, once they get there, things get to rolling, don't they?
Yeah, I've got to say, and maybe every parent would say this, whatever the circumstances, but I really don't have any regrets of at all about how things evolved.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of hard to be a different kid.
An interesting thought for the three of us, whoever's listening. When we were young, or maybe you still do, I don't know. Everybody floated the idea of having a soulmate. Like there was one perfect person in the world that was supposed to be your person. Everything was going to be perfect with that one person. I believed it when I was younger. And then as I got older, I thought, I'm sure there's lots of people that lots of people would be happy with. And then starting listening to us talk, I was thinking, what about in adoption? Are there soulmates in children? Like, would maybe Trish have been okay with a different kid other than Mara? Or Tom, would you, how all of this would have turned out just if any one factor had changed?
And the discussions when we were young, I remember my daughter would say, well, then it wouldn't have been me. And don't say that. If it really is all a series of random coincidences, I don't want to think about it. Because I can't imagine this not being reality. It's just painful to imagine that.
I can't either.
I found out
anybody else but the daughter we got. She's just fit right in with everybody. And it was, I think she fit in a little better with our family than I fit in with my family, for sure.
I found out when I was in my 40s, I was starting to look for my biological family, that my parents had actually put in to adopt through an agency. And there was somebody who was pregnant who was going to have a baby, and they were planning to adopt that baby. And then my parents' general practitioner, his nursing assistant, her daughter was pregnant. That was actually me. And I was born 2 weeks before the baby boy was born that they had planned to adopt. And it made me start thinking in our book that we wrote, I was like, I beat him out of a really good life. Like sometimes I kind of think, well, what happened to him? What had happened if I was 2 weeks overdue and he beat me to it? How different life would be for all of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it works out like it's supposed to.
I do at this point in my life believe that as well.
I do too.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah.
Well, I will also say, Tom, I know that I really, really did enjoy Geezer Dad, and I would highly recommend it to anybody that wants to read it, adopted or not. It is a really interesting take on going through the experience of becoming a parent, especially from the guy's point of view, and one who has as interesting of a sense of humor as you have. But I know you've also written other books. You want to tell us a little bit about those?
Well, I'm sure you'd like me to mention Zero Gravities, since you also
my daughter's favorite.
Yeah, I wrote.
Hey, is that it there behind you?
And my daughter helped her with the setting here. And for a while, the book was growing out of my head, and I don't think that quite works. But I had written 2 novels that are funny but somewhat serious novels, and got to think. Then I wrote Geezer Dad, and my life took a huge change. And I wrote a book called Zero Gravity because I'd actually had the idea for a while, and it turned into a YA novel because I realized it worked with a young person telling the story, that I'd never figured that out before. So just naturally, it kind of fell into place as a YA novel. And I've heard that some people like it. Trish can attest to that. Her daughter is a fan. And
I have the book report poster still to prove it.
But I've been pretty lucky with novels. I have received good reviews. My first novel was optioned for movie rights, and then there's a novel in itself about why that didn't happen. But after getting good reviews, and some big authors liked it, and I've been very lucky in that respect, and been even luckier in that I really love doing it. I'm totally obsessed with writing, and it gives me a lot of pleasure. My daughter is very creative. I mean, obviously that was encouraged in our house, and I'm sure she'd love to talk with you about that at some point.
Are you working on anything now?
Yes, I am. I'm actually writing a memoir that kind of builds upon Geezer Dad, but it's more of my life, and it's getting good reactions as I work on it. I also finished a novel, since I've been living in Florida, that won a statewide contest, the Florida Writers Association. And now that I've been away from that for a year, I'm going to go back and trim it, because I think that's what it needs before I send it out into the world. But
and if we were going to
always working on something.
And if we were going to look for your books, or people wanted to learn more about you, where would they go?
Oh, there's
the bio in this video.
Yeah.
We're going to link everything in the bio. Yeah.
It's tomlamarr.com, spelled like the Tom LaMarr on the screen, as one word, and then .com.
Wonderful.
Perfect.
Yes, well, when you finish that one, would you come back and talk to us about it?
I will.
Wonderful.
Great.
Sherry, do you have anything else you'd like to ask Tom?
Tom, I enjoyed having you on the show. I look forward to catching up with you and your books.
It was great talking to you both.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
We'll
talk to you soon. Good luck with the next book.
And come help us pack.